Tonight, we descend.
They called it a cottage in the listing, as if the word could shrink the long ribs of the roof or erase the cattle gates that sagged like tired mouths along the drive. The satellite photo showed a green smear of land, surrounded by a moat of pines, a clearing that drank what daylight would offer. It looked like privacy to me then, sanctuary for the kind of quiet work my grandmother said art required. She would have loved the way sun painted a gold bruise across the field. She would not have loved the house. I signed without touching it. The city's records said the property had changed hands often and cheap. A tired tax sale shuffled into a smiling bargain. There was no family history attached that I could find, no gossip on the forums, no obituary for a house. The parcel was old, older than the asphalt that ended a quarter-mile before the drive, older than the phones that lost reception once I'd crossed the last cattle guard. There are houses that meet you at the door with a scent you can name: lemon cleaner, cat, damp. This one greeted me with a smell I could not place, like candles snuffed with wet fingers, like meat pushed too long against a hot pan. The front door hung a little light on its hinges. It answered my key with an airy gratitude, as if relieved to be bothered. The foyer had a runner that swallowed sound, its pattern a field of small squares in off-white and brown. Each square looked fat, greasy, as if painted in strokes of broth cooled into a skin. Somewhere, a fly brushed glass. I stood holding the last box like an offering and listened. The house did not creak. The house did not settle. It held itself perfectly still, the way a sleeper pretends sleep. I walked the rooms with my phone out for light, though daylight still pressed the windows. The parlor was a longer echo of the foyer. Same square lard runner, same walls painted a yellow old people call butter and children call teeth. In the kitchen, the sink's porcelain was spidered with hairline cracks. When I ran the faucet, the water came out with a thin sweetness, almost medicinal, as if someone had steeped pennies in it and then skimmed off the metal until only the memory tasted remained. On the second floor, all the rooms were small, except one. That one had been 2 rooms once. You could see the seam of a wall erased, the plaster patch running like a healed wound down the ceiling. I chose it for my studio because of the window, 3 panes tall, wavy with old glass, staring into the pines. I set my easel there, and my grandmother's battered tackle box of brushes. A moth clung cold to the inside of the window, its fuzzed body the color of wood ash. I watched it pulse once and forgot it. There was no furniture to speak of, only the shapes where furniture had been. In the largest bedroom, a rectangle of unfaded floorboards marked a bed's old outline. Next to it, the oval ghost of a rug. The wood inside those shapes was a different species of clean, like a photograph where the faces have been cut out. I told myself that was what I loved, the negative spaces, the promise of new arrangements. I told myself many things alone in that house. The only thing that felt like an inheritance, besides the money that made all of this possible, was a small bundle I found tied with butcher's twine in the pantry under the stairs. Twine, brown paper, a little wax seal pressed with a thumbprint. Inside, 3 candles the color of old bones, and a length of line-dried ribbon stiff with something greasy. The candles were hand-poured, lopsided, pocked with bubbles. They smelled like the house. I set them on the kitchen counter and decided I had been here long enough without naming the unease. It was not fear. Fear is honest. This was the feeling of someone stepping out of my way before I see them, of a crowd parting for a figure whose face I cannot remember. It was the grief of a thing removed. I ate standing at the counter. Cheese, bread, 2 apples. The walls seemed to breathe toward me when I chewed. Night moved through the field like a slow tide. When I turned on the lights, their cones looked too tight, like the bulbs were swallowing instead of shining. I unpacked a quilt, smoothed it over the floor where the unfaded bed rectangle waited, and lay down. My phone lost the last of its signal, and then its clock felt wrong, like the minutes were heavy or punctured. I listened to the house hold itself still. I slept. In Dream, the house had the decency to tell the truth about itself. The foyer's runner of squares breathed. Each pale block rose and fell like a little chest, the brown ones like lungs soot-blackened by smoke. The parlor's butter walls gleamed with a wetness that was not paint. The windows did not look out. They looked in, their panes clouded with a film that made the outside scenery a rumor. The kitchen's faucet dripped something that was not water and steamed when it struck the sink. I have been inside bad houses in dreams before, but they usually want a single thing, attention or escape, or a dramatics of fear that can be appeased with running and waking. This house was organized. The walls had been moved. The long seam upstairs split open like a healed wound that remembered the knife and asked for it again. Hallways refolded themselves into narrower choices. Doors promised rooms and gave me corridors, then stairs that did not obey gravity's agreements with the body. My studio window was now a black rectangle that showed the idea of trees, as if the house had eaten them and was digesting the shadows.
I heard them before I saw them. First a shuffle, like heavy feet dragged in a slow dance. Then the soft, wet click of a tongue learning a new mouth. A woman hummed without opening her throat. The tune had the shape of a lullaby and the weight of a threat. She did not hum to comfort. She hummed the way a butcher hums to touch each knife and remember why it is loved. They turned corners like they remembered where corners belonged. None of them looked wrong in the way nightmares usually make things look wrong. They were wrong the way a portrait is wrong when someone has hung it back slightly higher than before. Familiar, tipped. An elderly woman led them, her hair wound into a pale nest, her eyes the dry white of candle wicks before the first burn. Behind her came a boy in a man's body, his hands rolling little coins of air between his fingers. A woman with a collapsed mouth, 2 girls who might have been twins or just made to wear each other's faces. A man who had been carved from someone gentler. Their clothes were the color of butcher's paper and old fat.
Hush now, we're visiting.
The words did not cross the space to me. They lodged in the air and fattened there, so I had to pass through them like a curtain. I ran. The house enjoyed my running. It grew longer where I did not need it to, and shorter where my lungs begged for length. Stairs ended half a step before my feet expected floor. Doors opened on broom closets that were also wells. I crawled along a hallway that had been a hallway only a moment ago, and now was a throat, with linoleum laid neatly along the meat. They did not chase the way predators chase. They practiced. They rehearsed my route, muttering the turns to themselves like the steps of a dance they had learned years ago and were too proud to admit they had forgotten. I found the front door, that polite hinge. It would not meet my hand. The knob stayed precisely 1 inch to the left of where I reached, as if moved there by a person with a ruler and a spite.
She'll do. She keeps all her pieces tidy.
When I woke, morning had not fully happened, but it pretended in the window. I lay still on the quilt and counted my fingers like a child who expects the magic trick to fail. All 10. My toes ached like they had run on gravel. When I pressed my palms to my eyes until shapes bloomed, I saw the parlor's runner of little squares, rising and falling. I told myself, because telling myself belonged to me, that it was only first night nerves, that I had eaten too little and thought too much. I showered. The water ran clean. When I dried my hands, the towel left a faint residue on my right ring finger, as if something had been between my skin and the fabric. I looked closer. The pad of the finger wore a gray shadow, as if a charcoal stick had been rubbed there and then wiped off in a hurry. The skin felt colder than the rest of my hand. I put the finger in my mouth without thinking and tasted the air of last night's dream. Snuffed candle, hot pan, the slick breath of animal fat turning back into itself. I told myself again that I was fine, and the house listened, and the house smiled its tight-lamped smile. I went upstairs to the studio and opened the window. The moth on the glass had left its body, but its powder remained, a little ash fingerprint looped into the shape of a thumb. The second night did not wait for me to fall asleep. It came early, like a debt collector. I had only shut my eyes against the weight of the day when the floor beneath me began to tilt. My body still lay in the bedroom, but my mind was already pulled downward into the house's other shape, the one stitched from fat and memory, the one that refused to die with its owners. The foyer greeted me again, though the squares in the rug now pumped in time with a pulse I recognized as my own. Each rise of the pale blocks tugged at my ribs. Each collapse of the dark ones emptied my breath. I walked carefully, as if stepping on a chest that might open its eyes. The house smelled sharper tonight. Candle tallowed turned rancid, pennies dissolved in vinegar, a sweetness too cloying to name. They were waiting. The grandmother's lullaby had grown teeth. It threaded through the walls like veins carrying spoiled blood. The others flanked her in the dark, faces pale as butcher's paper, eyes too wet, too hungry. They did not move until I did. When I stepped into the parlor, their bodies twitched in unison, like marionettes urged awake by a hand that could not decide which string to pull first. I ran again, though running here was like begging. The corridors lengthened, then folded. My footsteps splashed in puddles of something warm that stained my ankles. Doorways breathed, opening and closing, as if the house itself had lungs. The grandmother whispered behind me, her words wet and thick.
You'll be kind to us, won't you? We only take what we need.
The man with the carved face reached first. His hand brushed my shoulder, and I felt it in waking, skin tightening, a cold numbness spreading like frost across my collarbone. I screamed, but my voice echoed as if it belonged to someone else. When I jerked free, I stumbled into a staircase that should have led upstairs. Instead, it curled downward into cellars that had never been part of the house I bought. Down there, the walls dripped. The plaster bulged as if it were swollen flesh, stitched shut with rusty nails. I passed doors that moaned without opening, as if something inside them begged to remain unseen. At the end of one corridor sat a chair, and on that chair, the boy with a man's body. He rolled nothing between his fingers, coin after invisible coin, and grinned at me like he'd already spent them.
Sit with me. We'll count together.
I turned away, but the chair scraped after me, its legs screeching like bone dragged across tile. Each time I blinked, the boy was closer, his hands reaching, his fingers wanting something I could not see. I bolted into another hall and slammed the first door I found. It opened into my studio, or a mockery of it. My canvases were there, but each painting was skinned. The colors hung like hides, dripping onto the floor in slick puddles that steamed. In the center of the room, the moth I had noticed before was now human-sized, its wings beating dust into the air, its eyes cloudy like old milk. I pressed my hands to the window, but the glass turned soft beneath my palms, warm as tongue. It began to suck at me, pulling skin and bone. I tore myself free, leaving streaks of blood, and ran once more. The family's shapes closed in. The grandmother lifted one of the bone-colored candles I had found in the pantry. Its flame was wrong, dark at the center, rimmed in a color that hurt to see. She raised it like a torch, and the house leaned toward me as if drawn by the light.
You've brought us back, piece by piece. You'll understand soon.
I tripped over the lard-colored rug and fell onto my knees. Their shadows collapsed over me. The woman with the collapsed mouth opened wide, and the dark inside her throat rushed out like smoke, filling my eyes, my lungs. I felt teeth, not biting but pressing, counting each rib, each finger, each soft place that could be stolen. When I woke, my ring finger was black from knuckle to nail. The skin crumbled when I pressed it, as if ash lived inside. No pain, only the certainty of loss. I tried to scrub it under scalding water, but the stain remained. The rest of my hand began to ache with a deep, hollow hunger. My reflection in the bathroom mirror seemed blurred, as though someone had pressed their face against the glass from the other side. I told myself again that this was illness, stress, something rational, but the house listened. The house waited. Each time I crossed a room, the air thickened, congealed like broth left too long in a pot. The bundle of candles on the counter looked smaller than before, as if someone had shaved them down while I slept. The wax curled at their edges, sweating beads of grease that caught the light like eyes. Night promised me no mercy now. I knew the third time I slept, they would take more. And the house, that patient butcher, would keep tally until there was nothing of me left that pieces stitched onto its family again. The third night was not a choice. I tried to keep myself awake, coffee, cold showers, a knife in my lap like I could cut sleep away if it crept too near. But the house had patience older than my defiance. My eyelids grew heavy, not from exhaustion, but from the weight of something pressing down, a hand larger than mine, pushing me into the dark. The dream house greeted me as a host might greet a guest of honor. The foyer yawned wider now, its runner of square lungs panting, damp with breath. The parlor had shed its wallpaper and revealed ribs, long and curved, arching like the hull of something drowned. The smell was unbearable. Animal fat, rot turned sweet, candle wax mixed with blood. I gagged, and the house laughed, not in sound, but in the way the walls trembled, pleased. The family stood waiting, a tableau of butcher paper flesh and candle wick eyes. Grandmother held her candle higher, its dark flame flickering like a tongue that tasted me. The boy flipped his invisible coins and whispered numbers to himself, and the twins pressed their faces together until their skin blurred like wax melting into one.
Come closer, child. We're nearly whole again.
I ran, though I knew running was rehearsal for the theft to come. Corridors folded and spat me out into places I hadn't seen before, rooms stitched together from memory and meat. One chamber was filled with jars, each holding a finger, an ear, a tooth, floating in pale fat. My blackened finger pulsed when I saw them, answering the call of its kin. I pressed on, gagging, stumbling into another stairwell that bent sideways like a spine. The house wanted me to tour its collection before it finished taking mine. When they reached me, it was the twins this time. Their hands brushed my cheek, and in waking, I felt my left eye dim, vision paling as though a veil had dropped. I clawed at my face, but nothing remained except the gray blur on that side. In dream, the twins smiled, pressing my stolen sight into their sockets, where it burned darkly. I fell into a chamber that should have been my studio. The canvases were gone, replaced with stretched hides. My grandmother's quilt hung nailed to the wall, stained through with shapes of bodies that had lain beneath it. At the center of the room, the moth towered again, its wings shedding dust that settled on my shoulders, coating me in funerary ash. Its voice was not a hum, but a scream held just beneath hearing, vibrating my teeth until I thought they'd shatter. I begged aloud without meaning to. Please, stop.
Hush, you'll be beautiful in us.
They closed in, each family member greedy, each claiming their piece. The carved man pressed fingers into my ribs. The collapsed mouth woman opened her void and sucked at the sound of my breath. The boy reached for my hands, counting. And grandmother pressed her candle against my chest, and its dark flame entered me, filling me with smoke and hunger. I woke screaming. My vision was half shadow, my finger black, my ribs aching with a bruise I could not see. The mirror showed me wrong. My reflection lagged, smiling a beat too late. The eye on that side milk white, skin pale as butcher's paper. The house had kept its promise. It was making me tallow. I packed, feverishly, jamming brushes and clothes into bags. But each door I opened led me deeper in, never out. The front door was gone entirely. Windows stared only inward. The house folded, obliging the family's wish. I collapsed in the parlor, my body trembling. The candle bundle on the counter had vanished. Only grease stains remained. That was last night. Tonight I feel them stirring in the walls, whispering. They tell me I am nearly ready. When I close my eyes, I hear grandmother's voice behind them.
We've all the pieces now. One more night, child. One more night, and you'll stay with us forever.
If anyone finds this, know that the house does not keep tenants. It remakes them. And the Tallow family is hungry still.